What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we will be breaking down three streaming options at both the quarterback and the tight end position moving into week 3 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year round: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. So if you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. But more importantly, please get in the comment section down below any fantasy football questions that you guys have: starts, sits, trades, waivers, whatever it may be. Let me know down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. But without further ado, let's hop right into today's video. All right, first overall, we're going to talk about Russell Wilson, who, according to the Sleeper app, is rostered in exactly 50% of fantasy leagues, so he does technically make the cut. He is your quarterback 5 in fantasy right now, coming off of a strong performance against the Washington Commanders, which turned out to be kind of a back and forth, high scoring affair, obviously kind of a shootout at the end of the day. 26.9 fantasy points, 308 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 56 rushing yards, which was certainly interesting. This Miami Dolphins unit, good defensively, but also soft defensively at the same time. And what does Miami do? Man, they put up points. This Denver Broncos unit, I think, will be playing from behind. They're going to have to match the offensive power of the Miami Dolphins. Will they be able to do so? I hope so. And I think that they can do enough that Russell Wilson might not get you 26, 27 fantasy points, but I do think he gets you a safe floor. So if he's out there, you're not in love with your starting quarterback this week, maybe they have a tough matchup. Maybe you have Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, you're just not 100% confident. I do think that Russell Wilson is a safe streaming option moving into week 3. All right, last week, I told you guys I woke up feeling dangerous. I recommended Baker Mayfield as a safe option, maybe not a high ceiling play, but a safe floor play against the Chicago Bears. He gave you 18.3 fantasy points, 317 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 17 yards on the ground. He gets Philly this week. A lot of people are going to look at this matchup and say, no way am I starting Baker Mayfield. And maybe there's truth to that. Don't get me wrong, but a home game for the Bucs. And you guys may not realize the Philadelphia Eagles right now have given up the most points in all of fantasy football to the quarterback position as we approach week 3. Will that change against Baker? Maybe. But right now, Baker looks pretty dang comfortable in this offense. It's a home game. Mike Evans has looked good. Chris Godwin has looked good enough. Kate Otton's looked good. Rashad White bounced back last week. And ultimately, this Eagles defense has given up a lot of passing yards throughout the season to start. They are just as bad as teams like the Chargers. I mean, like I said, the most points to the quarterback position in fantasy football right now. So the secondary for the Eagles is just not what it was last year. Sure, you could argue the front 7 is still fine. They could get enough pressure on Baker that he could have a rough day. But ultimately, I still think he comes through for a similar range of what we got last week, around 18 to 20 fantasy points. I think Baker will have another surprising week, and I really think he's a guy who could make the list against soft defenses throughout the year. So Baker, if you're struggling, I think is a perfectly fine streaming option moving into week 3. My last quarterback for today's video is going to be CJ Stroud, coming off of a 21-point performance against a bad Colts defense. Admittedly, 47 passing attempts, 30 completions, 384 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. He also had 44 passing attempts against the Ravens in week 1. And most importantly, for Stroud as a rookie quarterback, he has not thrown a single interception so far this year. This Jacksonville's defense, it's nothing to sneeze at. Don't get me wrong. They are a good defensive unit. But at the end of the day, they have given up the 27th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks through the first 2 weeks of the season. So I do think Stroud, he might not have the highest ceiling this week, but it's obvious that the Texans are letting him rip the football all over the field, and he's doing so pretty good overall. I mean, like I said, no interceptions. He looked good last week. It's a tougher matchup this week, but like I said, this unit has just not been good against opposing quarterbacks so far this year. Nico Collins has looked good. Tank Dell finally had that big game, and I mean, just week 2 of the season, which is promising. And Robert Woods has not looked bad, and they still have Dalton Schultz at tight end. So he has the supporting cast around him. Damian Pierce hasn't done anything at running back this season, but there's a good enough supporting cast here, even with a bad offensive line and a pretty measly defense, at least in terms of their front seven, that CJ Stroud will be in a position to put up a respectable fantasy stat line. Does he give you over 20 points like last week? I'm not quite sure, but I think he'll get you something close to 20 points as we approach week 3. All right, first tight end I want to talk about is Hunter Henry, who for a lot of you guys out there might be a must start anyways, is already your tight end 1, but I really encourage you guys to fire him up last week against the Miami Dolphins after the strong performance in week 1 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and he did not disappoint. 7 targets, 6 receptions, 52 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. 16.6 fantasy points in week 1, 17.2 in week 2. Guys, Hunter Henry is the tight end 1 right now in fantasy football. I don't know what world we're living in, but this is the one we're living in. And a lot of people are kind of looking at this matchup against the Jets and saying, I don't think I want to start Hunter Henry. And listen, some of you guys, Henry's your starting tight end. He's who you're rolling out no matter what. But there are enough rosters I've seen out there where Hunter Henry has become a tight end 2 under roster. Maybe you're thinking of starting a player like Cole Kmet that you drafted over him. Maybe a player like David Njoku or Pat Freiermuth. Stick with Hunter Henry. Guys, this Jets defense is good, but they have given up the 28th most points to the tight end position so far this season. They have not been good against opposing tight ends. This is a good matchup for Hunter Henry. All I'm saying is, I mean, you might not be able to stream him. He's rostered in 67% of leagues. But if you own him, start him. It is a good matchup. He should be in your lineups. And if you can pick him up and stream him, start him. If he's the tight end 2 on your roster, have some confidence. He's a good start moving into week 3. All right, next up, we're going to talk about another tight end that I talked about last week who's also been picked up in a lot of leagues, but is still only 41% rostered, and that is Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals, okay? 2 matchups on paper right now. Week 3 against Dallas, week 4 against San Francisco, that a lot of people are looking at and saying, I'll pass for now. And listen, the Dallas Cowboys are coming in as 15th against the position, so kind of middle of the pack, but we never want to really sneeze at this Dallas Cowboys defense the way they're playing. But the argument I'm going to make for Zach Ertz, who has had 8 or more targets in his last 2 games, is that the Cardinals are going to simply be playing from behind in this matchup. How much are they going to be able to do? I mean, probably not a whole lot. But the fact that they will be playing from behind and forced to throw the football could be disastrous. Don't get me wrong, against this Cowboys unit, but I still think there's going to be enough opportunities for Zach Ertz that the volume should be there, the targets should be there. I think in full PPR, he might not be the safest start this week, but he is certainly still a streaming option moving into week 3. All right, last on the list, a player who's rostered in 6% of fantasy leagues right now, according to the Sleeper app, who we might want to consider a little bit stronger moving into week 3. That's Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who's coming off of a 10-point fantasy performance in full PPR, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 41 receiving yards, and similar to a lot of players we talked about today, you might look at this matchup against the Eagles and say, no, I'm good. I'm going to move forward. But we talked about Baker and this offense a little bit earlier in the video. And guys, the Eagles not only giving up the most points to the quarterback position in fantasy football through the first 2 weeks, they're also giving up the most points to the tight end position so far through the first 2 weeks of fantasy football. Dead last. 32nd against quarterbacks, 32nd against the tight end position. The secondary is just not what they were last year. Don't get me wrong, it's still early in the season, a small sample size, whatever. But if Mac Jones and company were successful against this unit, I'm not going to be ultimately too scared of Baker Mayfield and company. And I talked about Cade Otton a lot in the offseason. Baker loved Tyler Higbee when he was starting for the Rams. I'm not surprised that he's starting to look in Cade Otton's direction a little bit more, even having the wide receiver power that. So Cade Otton, just a strong streaming option as we move into the week. This Eagles unit has just given up a lot of points so far against Hunter Henry and TJ Hawkinson. This could be the week that Cade Otton finds the end zone. He's a really good streaming option moving into week 3. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did find the content today helpful or enjoyable, be sure to subscribe on the way out. This is all we do here all year round, free fantasy football, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, come join the community. We would love to have you. But more importantly, guys, any comments, questions, concerns pertaining to the 2023 fantasy football season that you guys have, starts, sits, trades, roster reviews, injuries, waiver wire, anything that you guys need, let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I will say, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.